players here and masterclass players at that. Abdullah coming into the scene and dominating, winning their first regional, being Vancouver with the Lilycold team. They've decided to switch it up though, and instead of running that Sun, that Lilycold, they're running the Pelipper for that Rain. Urshifu, the strongest mon in the format, arguably. You're boosting up its moves with that Pelipper, that Drizzle, just guaranteeing you do so much damage with the Terra Water, with the Rain. It just does so much damage.
You are an expert at this team, Tyson. You've been using this team a lot in the tournaments that you've been playing. One of the things that jumps out at me that's really interesting about this team, even though you do have Urshifu and you have a flying type of Pelipper with the Rain, one thing that this team sorely misses, or maybe not sorely, but one thing that is notably absent from this team is any type of speed control. How do you think that affects the way that Abdullah is going to have to play this match?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's super scary, right? Because when you are playing Rain, you have to acknowledge that you are giving the opposing Tornadus that we see on Marcus's team here, that Bleakwind Storm, which we know gets that 100% accuracy in the Rain. And you have things like Wide Guard on the Pelipper to kind of get around that, but we see Markus actually is Taunt here. And to kind of fight the Tailwind as well, you really need to focus on getting rid of that Tornadus, that being the Qian Pao with your Icicle Crashes. If you hit things like Fake Out and Rillaboom, stopping that Tornadus, but with things like the Terrestrialization Ghost on the Tornadus and Protect, it definitely will be an uphill battle, I think, for Abdullah here. You really have to focus on positioning your Iron Hands into your Qian Pao to get yourself in a position where you're able to take down the Tornadus, and then from there, you can kind of figure out where your pieces want to go and play from there.
One of the other things that we talk about a lot in the World Cup as well is the importance of scouting your opponent as an individual player. If somebody uses the same team every week, for example, it's a lot easier to sort of build in a couple of inherent counters to that team when you're considering your teams. And Markus is here using a very, very standard 6. This is just it's good Pokemon. But he's not using this team all the time. At LAIC, he was using a different team just a week ago, and Abdullah has a lot of tournament reps under his belt with this 6 that he's running. So I wonder if that has affected Markus's approach to this in any way, if he's maybe run more lines into Abdullah's team than Abdullah has into his team. That may be a little advantage that we see come into play once the game begins.
Yeah, and as we start our game here, it's very interesting to see that I think a lot of the cool things that you get to see when you do decide to opt in for a team that you have a lot of experience like that Abdullah has, is you're able to really play into your strengths. And even, you know, if your opponent does decide to counter team you, sometimes the experience that you have with your team is just that much stronger. As we see Abdullah lead here with the Iron Hands and then Qian Pao against Marcus's Tornadus and Fluttermane.
All right, so Abdullah leading that Iron Hands Qian Pao. That does seem to be elite. I've played against this team a lot as well, so I've seen Iron Hands Qian Pao a lot out of Abdullah. It seems to be one of the leads that he likes the most with this team. It is an extremely flexible lead here, and it gives him the ability to threaten things like a heavy slam onto the Fluttermane, a wild charge into the Tornadus. There's no covert cloak, so the Torn is also potentially vulnerable to a fake out here. There are so many different paths that this game could take that Markus has to consider while Abdullah is in the driver's seat for this turn 1.
Yeah, exactly. I think that Iron Hands Qian Pao lead offers so much pressure with the fake out and then Qian Pao. It seems to be the case with a lot of ruinous Pokemon. We've seen that to be the case with Chiyu as well. You're able to threaten that fake out pressure and then a strong damaging move as we see Markus go for that Tailwind and just a straight Dazzling Gleam going for damage, bringing that Qian Pao to Sash and Iron Hands to almost 50%.
This is a little bit scary, though. We saw no fake out. Qian Pao goes for the Icicle Crash. That is going to remove the Torn. And with no fake out, I feel like this is just a heavy slam into the Fluttermane. Tailwind may be up, but this is a double KO to start this game off for Abdullah.
And that's exactly one of the turns like that you just have with Iron Hands Qian Pao. Of course, the fake out Icicle Crash may be a little telegraphed, and Markus would have been maybe willing to make that trade. As we see, they went just for the Tailwind, but going and getting that double KO, I think sets Abdullah already ahead, right? 4-2. Even if your Qian Pao is down to Focus Sash now, you have a lot of leeway now that you know what Markus's 2 Pokemon are in the back, that being the Rillaboom and the Urshifu. You're able to play around. Your Iron Hands has a Terrestrialization still, even though it actually is that grass type instead of the water. So against the Rillaboom, you're not taking a lot of damage from those Wood Hammers, and you are able to resist the Searching Strikes from Urshifu.
I haven't run Mystic Water Urshifu in a hot minute, though, but with that much damage on the Iron Hands and the Qian Pao out, close combat could be risky into the Iron Hands. We do also have Grassy Glide and Fake Out as priority options for the Rillaboom. So while this is an amazing turn 1 for Abdullah, if Markus can make this second turn count, all of a sudden we go into an endgame where it's 2v2 or 2v3 with Tailwind on Markus's side, and then this could swing very quickly back in his favor.
Yeah, exactly. I think what Abdullah really has to do a good job of doing is kind of figuring out how to end game with this Iron Hands, because I do think with the Terrasillus and Grass, it is going to be your key to victory. If it does drop here, like you said, to a close combat, because Chin Pao is on the field, you could still even double into it with a Wood Hammer. It's still doing a lot of damage, even with resistant hits. We have learned in this format that tons of damage modifiers just do a lot of damage, obviously, but we are going to see a Sucker Punch go off into that Rillaboom, and a close combat actually picking up that KO on the Iron Hands.
And that is exactly what we were talking about before. Iron Hands uses the Terra, goes down for free. I mean, not for free, but like it takes... The Terra doesn't accomplish anything, is what I'm trying to say. And now that is a removed Chen Pao as well. So even though we saw Abdullah get that double KO on turn 1, such a massive momentum swing in his favor, Markus picks up a double KO on turn 2, and now we do go into that situation where it may be 2v2, but that addition of the Tailwind on Markus's side of the field is going to make it really difficult for Abdullah here, and especially because Abdullah, he's got Urshifu in the back with no Terastallization available and no Protect available. This Rillaboom on Markus's side of the field is applying so much pressure to that Urshifu.
Yeah, and even down, both trainers are down to their last 2 Pokemon on both sides. In turn 3 now of this game, by the way, there's just so much damage going out. Abdul's not out of the game yet, right? Rocky Helmet, Pelipper, I was a little surprised to not see it coming in that slot there. If you know that the Rillaboom and the Urshifu are going to double the hand slot, I think Pelipper could come in that slot, and with that Rocky Helmet, Urshifu would be the one taking a lot of damage and getting those drops from the close combat. Rocky Helmet is going to give Pelipper a way back in this game now. That Rillaboom, having taken that Wood Hammer recoil, as well as that Sucker Punch, in addition, I think that Hurricane, even though... depending on how this Rillaboom is built, Hurricane might be able to pick up the KO here on Rillaboom.
Here comes the Terra out of Markus. I feel like it's the Rillaboom. We saw, this is Terrifier Rillaboom, but we saw an Aqua Jet lock-in from Abdullah. That is probably going to be enough with the rain, right? Like, this is a huge amount of damage potential here. Rillaboom does not go down, though.
Wow.
It survives and just fires back with the Grassy Glide. Also doesn't pick up the Urshifu. The Surging Strikes will follow up and remove that Urshifu from play.
But it's also very important to note here that Rillaboom lives. So Semper now is, you know, considering that in a Game 2 scenario where they may want to go for that play again, I'm really interested to see where this Hurricane goes. And it's into that Rillaboom slot. This Urshifu now has to fight a Rocky Helmet Pelipper. And I think Abdullah, with the Rocky Helmet chip from Surging Strikes, it is a multi-hit move. As well as the close combat drops, should just drop to a Hurricane.
Yeah, I think the Terra on the Rillaboom there, removing any possibility for that defensive Poison Terra on Urshifu, very well may have just locked that game for Abdullah. We don't really think about Pelipper as an offensive Pokemon all that much, but when it's used in this format, one of the reasons it is so effective is that it can apply that pressure with 110 base power Hurricane that does not miss in the rain. And even though Pelipper may not be the strongest Pokemon like a Fluttermane on the special attacking side, that kind of a move is going to apply a lot of damage when it goes in, and we're about to see it seal this game.
Yeah, and exactly as you kind of said before, where Pelipper isn't the best stats, Flying Stab, as we've seen with Lander Starion, right? Those strong flying type stab Terra Blasts. It does so much damage, and there's lots of things in the meta, like Rillaboom, like Urshifu, even like Ogerpon, that are all weak to those flying stab moves, and having access to that gives Pelipper that niche as well as Drizzle to enable things like Urshifu. It just makes it the perfect fit on a team like this as well, as we saw there in that end game where you're able to beat down the Rillaboom and the Urshifu with Rocky Helmet, Hurricane, guaranteeing your Hurricanes with the rain. It just is that perfect niche.
So let's see if that does end up playing a role, if that additional information gleaned can change the outcome. As once again, we have the same lead out of Markus, but a different lead out of Sempra. Going for a similar idea, though, you still have that fake out pressure from the Rillaboom, but not quite as much offensive pressure into this lead.
And I like this lead a little bit better from Semper because you're not weak to Fluttermane off the bat, right? The thing about that we saw in game one is that Fluttermane was able to just go for a Dazzling Gleam and put it in range of a close combat next turn from that Urshifu, as well as a Woodhammer double up with the Qianpao. Rillaboom, right? Now you only have Qianpao that's weak, and you can still kind of go for the same play. Instead of Heavy Slam, though, you have access to things like Woodhammer to fire off into this Fluttermane. Sure, Rillaboom can come into the slot, but as you saw last game, you're able to do a lot of damage. And Markus is still risking something like an Icicle Crash going off from the Fluttermane. As we see this Tornadus, Terrasala's into that Ghost Terra, so you maybe aren't weak to that Icicle Crash.
We did see Abdullah lock in the Lash Out, though, so Abdullah not playing this game. I do like this idea a lot, right? Like, well, there is a likelihood that there could have been an Arcanine switch in as well to try to allow that Fluttermane to survive, so Lash Out would have had a lot of offensive presence if there was an Intimidate here, but it also does cover for this Terra Ghost. That's going to be a really, really good turn for Abdullah, doing a decent amount of damage there to that Rillaboom, but there's not even Tailwind out of the Tornadus. He went for Bleakwind Storm, and it's not going to accomplish anything. Markus loses his Terra, loses his Tornadus, and takes big damage on that Rillaboom, all for the price of just seeing what the Terra was on Abdullah's side of the field.
Yeah, and very interesting as well, I want to point out the Grass Terra on Abdullah. Again, we've talked about modifiers. The Terra Grass on Rillaboom, just wanting more damage. There's no reason to go for a Fire Crystallization and not get burned when you could just give yourself that Grass Terra and do so much damage with those Grassy Glides and Wood Hammers, as we see Abdullah's Rillaboom opt in for.
I don't even know where you go here from Markus. If you had the Terra Poison available on the Urshifu, then all of a sudden you can play around that Rillaboom a little bit. But this looks like an extremely free Grassy Glide Icicle Crash here. Like, obviously, if you miss Icicle Crash, that's a little bit painful. But 90% of the time, I feel like that does just seal the game. But of course, Abdullah, being the player with the skill level that he has, is going to try to find a line that does not lose to a potential miss here. Opting to switch out that Rillaboom, likely reading a Protect there on that Urshifu, but also having the opportunity to potentially chip away at that Rillaboom if it goes for any kind of a move into the Pelipper. And it does dodge the Icicle Crash!
Yeah, and that's going to be a huge miss as well, considering now that this Qianpao just goes down. Unfortunately, the Pelipper comes in and sets the rain, allowing that Urshifu to get the KO on the Qianpao. Maybe if the Qianpao would have been able to live without the rain, but I think the rain kind of confirms it. That usually that's what we see, that Splash Plate and that Mystic Waterfall to guarantee that KO. We are going to see a U-turn there from the Rillaboom, going to the Pelipper, taking a little bit chip from that Rocky Helmet, back into that Fluttermane from Markus.
All right, so Fluttermane, we do have the possibility for this Rillaboom to come back in, but losing access to that sort of ruin may well be the difference between Fluttermane being vulnerable to a 1-hit KO from a Grassy Glide or Fluttermane surviving. Now, a lot of that just purely depends on the kind of spread that Markus has gone for, but a lot of these Specs Fluttermanes have been trending more and more bulky lately, so it could be difficult to find a way through this, but we're going to have to see. There is a lot of offensive pressure from Abdullah's side. Once again, Markus not able to protect that Fluttermane, so that slot is at risk.
Yeah, and I think that's why Abdullah went for the Terra Grass turn 1, is you want to make sure you guaranteed the Fluttermane, and without Qianpao on the field, as you kind of pointed out before, the Fluttermane, there is a chance for it to survive this Grassy Glide here, but I think with the amount of modifiers that we see on the field, there is just so much damage coming out, and this Pelipper is such a threat. Even though your Qianpao missed Icicle Crash, it slows down the game a little bit, but this Rillaboom is still such a threat, and Markus has to really find a way how to get rid of it. And that is going to be by switching the Rillaboom in for the Fluttermane to take another resisted hit from this Grassy Glide.
But we saw earlier how much damage this does regardless of the resistance. There we go. Grassy Glide's going to do another massive chunk of damage. That's going to KO Rillaboom next turn, even after the healing. Surging Strikes is going to come in. It's going to dish out pretty solid damage here to this Rillaboom, but the Urshifu is at risk from this Hurricane. I believe we did see Abdullah click Hurricane into that Urshifu slot.
Yeah, Markus opting to play as safe as possible. They need to click Surging Strikes there so they at least have a chance to eat this Hurricane here. We do see it drop anyways, which is a little unfortunate. if you do go for close combat, right, you do maybe a little bit more damage, but you are going to be -1. So going for Surging Strikes, taking advantage of that rain, trying to find any way back into this game. The Icicle Crash, maybe living that Hurricane, maybe would have won you a way back in. But again, this Rillaboom, being able to go for those Grassy Glides over and over again is just so threatening. Like you said, that Rillaboom is in range of Grassy Glide. This Flutter Mane is going to drop to a Wood Hammer, but if the Flutter Mane does, because it has those choice specs, it should be able to pick up the Rillaboom maybe from this range.
Yeah, Fake Out is also an option for Markus here. Fake Out into... There is no Protect on that Rillaboom. There is Protect on the Pelipper, but not on the Rillaboom, despite not having that Assault Vest. So Rillaboom is going to opt to switch out here. It's going to be a difficult lock-in for Markus, though. If he locks into Dazzling Gleam and does not remove the Pelipper, then Wide Guard becomes a very serious issue. But Dazzling Gleam comes in, the Pelipper survives, there's no Fake Out, but the Pelipper is faster than the Rillaboom and removes that Rillaboom from play. The Pelipper has access to Wide Guard, the Flutter Mane is stuck clicking Dazzling Gleam, and Sempra has locked this game number 2 and has kept Canada alive in this top 16 series.
Yeah, Abdullah played absolutely amazing this game, and I think Markus was definitely taken aback there, seeing the Rillaboom being slower than the Pelipper. As we saw, they didn't go for Fake Out, so they actually most likely were doubling that Pelipper slot